Hello there and welcome to Cansanity. It's another beautiful day here in southern Ontario, and so I thought I would get into my garden and see what's ready to be picked. And I was checking out my garlic earlier and I think that my scapes are ready. So let's head on over and take a look. Okay, so I'm standing beside my garlic box in my backyard where I'm growing 100 heads of garlic. And as you can see, the garlic is really healthy. It's June 16th, and just a couple days ago, the plant started to produce scapes. Now, scapes are the seed, and you want to get in there and snip those off, because if you leave them on the plant, that's going to take away energy from that the plant is producing for bulb production. So you want to get in there and snip those scapes off so that all that energy goes into making nice large garlic bulbs. Now you don't want to throw these away. These are delicious. They have a mild garlic flavor, and so you can chop them up and saute them and put them into a stir fry, or puree up the sauteed scapes and put them in a pasta sauce. Or my favorite way of using garlic scapes is to use them in a potato salad. So what I do is, while the potatoes are boiling, I throw my scapes into the pot and boil them for about 3 to 5 minutes. And then the garlic flavor is infused into the potatoes. And then I take the scapes out and I cool them. And then when I'm making the potato salad, I chop them up and throw them in. And it's delicious. So don't throw out your garlic scapes. So I just want to show you where you snip on the scape. So you want to get right down to the base and snip it right like that. And there you have it. Okay, so I'm back in my kitchen and I harvested all the scapes off my garlic. And I'm happy to have been able to do that because I like to pick all my garlic scapes when they're small, so that the energy that the plant is producing goes into the bulb. And so I was really happy to have been able to get out there and pick them while they were small. And so the disadvantage of picking your scapes when they're small is that you're not going to have a lot of scape to use in your recipe, because you're going to cut off the flower or seed head and then just only use that portion. And so once that was chopped to between 1 and 2 inches in length, then I ended up with about 3 cups of scape. And so now the recipe on the website for this garlic scape soup calls for 4 cups of chopped scape. But if you don't have that, that's okay. I'm only going to use 3 cups today. And if I had leeks in the house, I would chop up some leeks and add maybe a cup of leeks as well for another element of flavor to the soup. But today I'm just going to use the 3 cups of chopped scape. Now, I did want to tell you that garlic is a fantastic vegetable to grow in your garden because it's easy to grow. You plant it in the fall, it comes up in the spring. It doesn't really require a lot of maintenance, or doesn't require that you water it. Usually, we'll get a lot of rain in the spring, and so once it gets hot around this time of the year, then I have to get out there and water it. But generally, it does well on its own. You can get your harvest of your scapes in the second week of June here in this area, and you can also pick your garlic fresh. So I picked one today just to show you that I could use that bulb right now. And now if I waited another 2 weeks and picked it fresh, then it would be a little bit bigger. But that's just a way that you can also harvest your garlic and use it. You can pick it fresh. And so you can start harvesting your garlic the second week of June, and then continue on and use your garlic until it's used up. And my garlic for drying is ready to harvest about the first week of August, and then it takes a couple of weeks for it to cure. But we'll talk more about harvesting garlic in a later video. So I think I'm ready to get started in making the soup, and so we'll we'll start with talking about the ingredients. Okay, so I have my medium-sized pot on the stove on medium-high, and I have put in 2 tablespoons of olive oil in the pot so that it can heat up, and so that'll be ready in just a moment. So to that pot I'm going to add my garlic scapes, and I'm going to saute that for about 12 minutes. And then once that's done, I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, and a 1/4 teaspoon of hot pepper, chili flakes. And then I'm going to just saute that for a minute. And so I'm just going to get the pot and get that started. And yeah, that looks like it's ready. You hear that sizzle? Smell that garlic. Okay, so I have been sauteing the garlic scapes for about 10 minutes now. They're almost ready to, I'm almost ready to move on to the next step. And so I turned the heat down to, it was about medium. And so you can see that they're a nice bright green color. And the aroma is just really nice and garlicky. And so I just have about 2 minutes left on that saute before I move on to the next step. And so I'm going to add my salt and my pepper and my hot chili flakes next. And I want to add that before I add the broth, because you want to activate the flavor of the chili flakes. And so I have just a minute left, and so I'm going to just grab the pot now. And that's good enough. Shut it off. And I'm just going to add my salt. So I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. And I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of my hot chili flakes. Just going to stir that around. That's all good. And I'm just going to put that back on the element for about a minute. And so while that's sauteing a little bit, then I'm going to talk about the next ingredients that we're adding. So I'm going to add my broth next, and what you want to do is you want to heat your broth first before you add it to your pan. And that's because you don't want to waste time bringing the broth up to temperature. Like if you heat it first, then you don't have to worry about wasting time heating up the temperature of the broth. You're going to start cooking the vegetables right away. So I always heat the broth first for this recipe, and so this is already heated, and so I'm just going to add that to my pot, and then I'm going to add my diced potato. So that's peeled and diced. Today I used a russet potato. You're going to puree this soup up, so you don't have to worry about the size of the dice of the potatoes. So this is kind of a rough dice, or it's not a small dice, it's a medium diced potato. And so now you're going to put that back on the stove, and you're going to cook that, bring that up, the temperature up to medium-high again, and you're going to bring that up to a boil, and then once it's boiling you can turn it down to medium, and then you're going to cook that for about 15 minutes once the potatoes feel that they're softened. And don't worry too much about how firm the garlic scapes are, because you're going to put that in a blender. Okay, so my soup is cooking now, and while that's cooking I'm just going to talk about the next step, and I'm going to talk a little bit about fresh basil. So this is fresh basil that I picked out of my garden, and when you use it in a recipe, the best way to use basil is to snip it rather than to chop it, because when you chop it on the board, a lot of the oils from the fresh basil gets into the board, and so you know, to get as much flavor out of the basil, you want to actually use scissors and snip it. And so this is going to top my soup and give it that nice fresh basil flavor. And so I will snip about ½ cup's worth of basil so that I can distribute that over the soups. And so I'll finish that in a minute. And now I also use different rasp that I have, or microplane, and this is just another version of the microplane, and I like this version as well. You can just put this over top of a bowl and just easily run your citrus over top of the blades, and then you have your nice zested citrus. And so for this recipe I need about a teaspoon of zested lemon. Now you could use ½ teaspoon to a teaspoon. And so what you want to do is zest your lemon first and then get the juice out. And I did talk in a different video where if you want to get the most out of your most juice out of your lemon, put it in the microwave for about 10 seconds and then heat it up so that it softens the fruit and loosens the pulp from the membrane, and then you'll get a little bit more citrus out of the lemon. Now I already I already pressed a couple lemons, and so I have some strained lemon juice already, and so I'll use that. And then I'll just use this lemon for some raspberry lemonade. And so I'll just put that aside. And so I think my soup is almost ready. And so we're almost ready to do the next step. Okay, so the potatoes and the scapes are cooked in the broth and ready to move on to the next step. So I'm just going to grab it off the stove. Now I did put a lid that was just loose on the soup so that I didn't evaporate all the liquid out of the soup. And so, but be careful when you do that. Don't put the lid on tight, because then your soup's just going to boil over. So I used an oversized lid so that the air can escape, and I turned, once it was boiling, I did turn the heat down. So what we're going to add to the broth now is we're going to add our lemon juice. And so I have my freshly squeezed lemon juice. I'm going to add a tablespoon of lemon juice. I'm going to add my cream. Stir this up. And I'm going to add my cream. And I'm going to add my lemon zest. So that was a ½ cup of cream, whipping cream, and a teaspoon of lemon zest, and 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. Give that a stir. Now you want to warm that up, or you can just blend that now. Like, you're only adding a ½ cup of cream, cold cream, to this broth, so that's not going to cool it down so much that you really need to heat it up. But if you want to heat it up to get it right piping hot, then you can return it to the stove. So next you're going to blend the soup in batches. So what we're going to do there is I'm just going to grab a bowl out of here so I can do that in batches. And then we're just going to pour it off into here just to see what it looks like. I'm just going to grab a scoop. Nice tangly mess. And so anyways, I'm going to add my broth with the scapes and the potato into my Vitamix. I love my Vitamix. It's the best blender that you could possibly get. It blends everything nice and smooth, really quickly. And so if you like to blend things, then 100% I recommend getting Vitamix. So now when you're blending hot liquids, you want to make sure that you have something to put over top of your over top of the blender, because once you turn the blender on, the force is going to be up when it's hot, and or more so when it's hot, and so you don't want it to just come up through the top of your blender. So I have it set to 1, so I'm just going to blend it up. And because there's so much liquid in there, I didn't need to use the plunger there to make it, to keep all of the solids down. And so I'm just going to pour that off. You see how the nice color that is? And I'm just going to blend up the rest of the soup, and then we'll serve it. Okay, so the soup is all pureed. It has this just nice green color. And we're just going to pour some into the bowl. And this is how I like to serve it. I like to serve it like that, in this bowl like this. And then I like to add the Parmesan cheese on top, and then just let it melt into the soup. You could also just puree the Parmesan cheese right into the soup, but I like to have a little bit of texture in the soup, so I would do it this way. And then I would take some of my slivered basil and just top that on the soup like that. And there you go. Bon appetit. Okay, so I've had my soup and it was delicious. And so I thought I would get back out in my garden and finish the video outside and tell you a little bit about basil. So this is the basil plant that I picked up from the nursery in April and potted, and then I babied it by bringing it outside and inside. When it was cool, I'd bring it inside. When it was nice and sunny, I'd bring it outside. And I like to get started with some basil as early as I can in the spring, so that I can have fresh basil for recipes like that garlic scape soup. And so one thing I should tell you about basil is that when you plant it, after it's been in the pot for a week or two, take off the tops and just snip them off, and that will allow the plant to, it will encourage the plant to bush out. And so I've already done that with this plant, and so that's why it's so bushy. And when the flowers start to appear on your basil, you want to clip them off and just snip them off. And that's because if you let the basil plant go to flower, then the stems will become woody and the basil leaves will change flavor. And so that will happen eventually with this plant. And so I like to start basil, I like to plant basil throughout the season, and so I will plant basil at the end of June and beginning of July, so that I have some fresh, big leaf, nice flavorful basil for my fall candy. And so I hope you've enjoyed this video. Have a great day.